back to another episode of the Ty Brady Way. And today I have Brian. It's Knox, right?
That is correct.
One of the things that I just talked to him briefly about here, Brian, is that you're a veteran. You've done a few things over your career, and today we wanted to talk about life and life challenges and so on. So one of the things is veterans listen to the show. I do have a lot of veterans listen to the show as well as entrepreneurs. So how long were you in the military?
Oh man, I was almost a year of training. I got right out of high school back in
Wow.
1990, and almost a year. Then I went on an LDS mission, came back, and was another 5 or 6 years in the National Guard.
Hmm.
Did airborne infantry and broke my knees trying to go special forces, and then finished off with intel.
Wow.
Army intel, the big oxymoron, right?
It's needed, right?
It is indeed.
My wife's father was in the Navy, retired from the Navy, and he tells a story about he would have been a lifer because I think he was 26 years in or 28 years, I can't remember. He would have kept in there, but one night his crew dropped a nuclear weapon on the ship, and that was the end of his career. So he said once that was on my record, I couldn't advance anymore. Went from there to NASA. So he worked for NASA for a lot of years, but it's kind of crazy
Probably
how
more enjoyable at NASA. I don't know. But,
yeah, he said one of the disadvantages is, the military, well, there was a skill set that he had, but it didn't necessarily equate to outside of the military. So NASA picked people up because they knew their skill set, but outside of that, it was anywhere else was hard to get a job because he's essentially a mechanical engineer, and that was his expertise, but he didn't actually have the credentials, which is,
right.
pretty
Well,
weird.
my main job, at least in most of my job there, was airborne infantry. There's not a lot of people who will pick you up, in private life to jump out of airplanes, fully equipped to do war. So
That's you relate, right?
yeah, absolutely.
Brian, so you go and you're a vet, you get busted up, and by the way, I appreciate your service.
Thank
So
you.
what transpired after the military? What was your path and what you're doing now and what life's bringing you?
For a short period of time, I was in sales. You can relate to that, right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, right. And that's a tough life. And I've been in sales, yeah, and that's the thing about life is you're always in sales, no matter
Yes.
what. And you have to realize that and what you're selling. But then I went into law school, kind of a non-traditional path. I think I was 31 when I went into law school at Duke.
Wow.
Got my law degree, got another master's of international law, intending to practice international business law. Got out and actually moved to northern Idaho, practicing with a small firm up in Lewiston, and I loved it up there. But then I moved to Boise, trying to practice commercial litigation, and I got to be honest, I hated it. Um, I hate litigation. I hate fighting other people's battle. If you come at me and it's my fight, I'll fight it. But yeah, and I don't know how attorneys do it, fighting other people's fights. But power to them.
You,
We need.
you're you're taking the blows for somebody else. Wow, and that's too much. I get it.
Yeah, it's just something I didn't want to do.
It's like you're like, I'm okay to deal with my own battle if I create the problem, but when somebody else creates a problem and then you're asking me to step in and bail you out, that's a little bit hard. Wow.
Yeah.
I never
Yeah.
looked at it that way.
Yeah. So then I backed out and started doing more commercial transactional stuff, estate planning. And I like that. Okay. I still do that, very, very part time. Through the course of the next, from then until now, I've done some teaching. I taught, international law at a law school. I teach at a small classical liberal arts college in Murray, Utah, named Mount Liberty College. And now I don't know what it was. 2019, on a whim, I started making soap. And
Uh-huh.
we had a little discussion before this call. It was just, I've always been drawn to, I guess I call them ancient arts. I've done some blacksmithing and leather making and whatever. And one day I started making soap, and I turned to my wife and I said, what if I made a go of this? And I remember the look on her face was like, well, who are you? But she knows who I am. So, it was the end of 19, when I finally got serious about it. I started this a couple weeks before COVID shutdowns. And so it was a struggle. And it's, I mean, business always is, but we got through, um, throwing everything into it.
You mentioned something just a bit ago, is that, you started in sales, and even now you're still in sales. I mean, there was you're either sold or you're being sold. Or you're either the one doing the selling or you're being sold. I mean,
No,
because
even if you're being sold, you are still selling.
yes,
I mean, there's
that is
something about
right.
you that you're selling.
If you're going to look for a job, you're selling yourself on why you can help them. And then you're probably then turn around and selling a product, a service of some kind.
You
I
know,
sell
I
myself.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I listened to one of your episodes. I don't know if it was the last one or one of the, anyway, in it you were saying, hey, at the end of the night, tell yourself 5 things you're grateful for, and wake up in the morning and tell yourself 5 things you're grateful for. You're selling yourself right there.
That's
And
correct.
you're telling yourself this is the way life really is. And what I do, I actually stood up in church and told people this. I said, listen, I used to be all too honest with people when they'd ask, hey Brian, how are you? And I take people at face value and I'd tell them. Um, and sometimes those days weren't great, and I'd tell them, and I started realizing this isn't setting the stage for me very well, and they don't care, number one, usually. Um, and so I determined a way to answer that correctly, very honestly, with integrity, and still just leave it surface level, but it's programming me to think right. And that is, I can, no matter if things are good or bad around me in the world, and no matter if the day is going great, or not, I just say I'm blessed because,
Oh, I love it.
Jesus Christ is my savior. I believe strongly in, that I'll be saved in the kingdom of God. And you know what? I'm blessed. So it doesn't matter. And you know what? Every time I say it, it programs me that I feel pretty darn good about things.
In my life, for me, it seems like things go in patterns. And what you just said is something that I have heard since the beginning of the year. I talk to individuals and they say, my business changed when I started putting service first. When I provided the service, the byproduct of that service, the income came. And these are people that, that sit on boards at foster care, or people
Yep.
that sit on boards at medical, all these different avenues. And they are blessed. And it's the, the fundamental thing is when you serve, the money will be there. I'm going to be interviewing a guy next week that he does a lot with first responders, which my wife did as well during COVID. And he's just a phenomenal guy. He's an independent business owner. He helps a lot out with the previous hurricane in Miami, or down in Miami. He got 2 truckloads delivered down there, and he was on the ground getting things delivered that people needed. I'm sure here in the next coming days, he's going to be doing something with the fires in California. The problem is they're not letting anybody in there right now. So, but I'm sure that he's got a plan to go and deliver what those people may need, from just the simplest things, toilet paper as an example.
How about
You
some
just,
soap? That's
well, yeah, no, you're correct. Yeah. So,
right.
what I'm fascinated about is you didn't, I mean, you're like, I'm going to, so, I mean, unlikely, right? You could continue down international law and all these things that you're credentialed to do, but soap, I mean, how does one go about even like starting that? I'm just fascinated. Like,
you know what? I know you want to go there, but can I divert for a minute
Yeah,
because you
absolutely,
guys have
absolutely. This is for you, bud. Yes, absolutely.
uh, because uh, frankly, I'd rather talk about life and lessons and that course, what God does, rather than talk about soap. My product is great, by the way. Go to ethelbarra.com. Whatever, and buy my stuff. I love the support, but, um,
I'll have you on again to talk about how you got into that, like really,
yeah,
because
yeah, okay.
yeah, fair enough.
But
So
but here's
go
the
ahead.
interesting thing. You talked about serving and how serving really a byproduct of service is success. Service is what it's all about. Well, I've been involved for several years. I'm a founding board member of the Hope for Life Foundation, and we are veterans helping veterans, and so many veterans are getting out. And we've got I don't know how many veteran suicides a day. We talk about 21 or 22. I don't know if that's accurate, but the problem is veterans get out and they're living under this grand mission, in the military, and then they get out into life, and that mission's gone, and they've got to find their own. And so we do retreats. They're Christ-based retreats to help veterans deal with the masks and demons that they're carrying around with them, and it's fantastic. But my big dream, I've had this dream for over 10 years, is to start a farm slash ranch that's based for veterans to get out and for the right ones to learn how to get into agriculture and training them and then getting them started in that, them and their young families. And it's morphing as I put this business plan. This is the funny thing is, as that dream is going, everything that I'm doing in my business is opening doors for that. And I'm learning this thing. When you set a vision, don't put limitations on it, because God will give you your vision, and if you let him, the vision's big. He's like, don't you have a little vision? I'm going to give you more than you think for that, and that's really great to see his hand in things. So
Absolutely. Yeah, a little story about me putting limitations on it. A few years ago, I said in my, my vision board, and the thing that I said is I want to beat this person. So, I'm competitive, and by doing that, well, guess what? I beat that person for the year, but I came in second place overall. So I'm like, I'm never doing that again. So when I set that vision board, I'm like, I want to be number one. I'm not going to beat that person. I want to be number one in the country, because my limiting belief to myself, I got what I achieved, what I asked for, but I didn't get the overall number one spot. And I was like, I was crushed. I was defeated. And I learned a lesson, a hard lesson, like you just talked about.
and my philosophy on that is, as long as you're going to be doing good things with what your success brings. And I've got to assume that about you. I don't know you, Ty, very well, but I know your wife. She's fantastic, right? She's involved in so many causes. And,
Yeah.
um, oh, and by the way, if you go to my website, use the code Amanda10, it'll get you 10% off. There's a little shout out to Amanda. But if you're going to be using those, the success and the fruits of success for good things, I think you'll be blessed with it. And so you set that vision, and if your intentions are correct, I think you'll surpass your vision.
Oh,
So
I completely agree. One of the things that we talked about prior to the show, and this is, I think, an unfortunate thing, is that you were in the service, and so many people that serve and that are veterans, what they did in the military does not translate into the real
yeah,
world.
yep,
And for me, I have a lot of veterans on my team that decide, hey, I want to get in the insurance space, and they do really well. But those are some of the most dedicated, show up on time. I mean, absolutely fantastic employees. Now, it may take a little bit to get them trained for what you want them to do, but like I think you said, you were infantry, or what do you call that?
yeah,
You're
airborne infantry.
yeah, I mean, you're not going to go out and get a job in the private sector. It's just not there.
I mean, if anybody's got one, I'd love to jump from planes again. So great.
I mean, skydiving maybe, right? Still, but that's it.
Right, right.
And that's pretty limited when you talk about it. But yeah, so now you've started this foundation with when you say Hope, is that the same one they were pushing here a few years ago with all the kids in school because there were so many suicides? Is
No,
that the same kind? It's a different
no.
one.
The Hope for Life Foundation is located out in Tooele, Utah, and we
Uh huh.
really still pretty small, but we have a banquet every year. And in fact, I'd love to invite you guys out to our banquet. It's all every year on Armed Forces Day. And it's we do 2 retreats a year and with follow up stuff, and we see some real miracles happen.
I do like that. 20 years ago, or even longer than that, a lot of people didn't talk or make awareness or things that were available for people struggling. And I believe mental illness is a real thing,
Yeah.
whatever it is. I mean, you look at people getting addicted to substances. I think they're self-medicating, dealing with something else, PTSD, trauma. I mean, we all have trauma, right? And I think one of the ways you get through trauma is you got to talk about it and realize you're not alone. I mean,
Well, I'll
whether
give you an
it's,
example. Yeah, no, I'll give you an example. One of my best friends, he's named Brad Bonner. He's the founder of One Degree of Separation, which is a comedy show. He's a comedian, ventriloquist, magician. He's the most fun guy to be around. And he gets banks of comedians together to go around and talk with people about, because normally the funny guys are really the most depressed guys. Um, I'm usually, I mean, people, and I'll divulge more. I'm so open with myself. I've been suicidal, a couple times,
mhm.
and I've had to deal with that. You've got to have people to talk with. And sometimes you get there and you have no idea why or how you got there. You just gotta, and there just have to be some resources, and sometimes you don't want to talk, and it's those people that just say, just choose to be happy, and you're like, um okay. but
Yeah,
and which of course fuels anger, and but you hopefully you get out of it, and I've this foundation was really a helpful thing to me in that regard. So yeah, no, we need to have less stigma about talking about it.
yeah. I lost a sister. Well, we don't know if it was accidental or intentional, to that. So
Sorry.
and it's just, I mean, I think if you ask people, kind of like, I mean, cancer is running rampant. It's the same thing with that side, whether they be young, old, and different. The one thing is, they're not. You just got to. They're not alone. I mean, I've had agents come to me and saying, "Hey, this career, saved my life. Because they thought they could never get out. Whether they felt like a failure as a father or back, a ball and chain around because of debt or they lost a job or whatever, it's all those things that, I'd like to say I've never been there, and I don't know, I couldn't relate, but I want to help, right? I mean, that's a real thing.
Well, and there is value in programming yourself, right? That gratitude stuff that you talked about, it it's really helpful to me. But and if you can keep with that and program yourself, that, I'm blessed. Most of the time I think that helps. But some people just have chemical imbalances, and it's a real thing, and we need more compassion, and so I'm sorry for your loss. That's a rough thing. I had actual attempts in my own family, and
Oh,
it's a tough thing. Which anyway,
there's another one who was a real close friend of a friend, and it was their son. And I just, luckily somebody found him, and, he's doing better and he got the help he needed. And I
thank
mean,
God.
it's been like 2.5 years, and he just, it's just, for whatever reasons, right? I got no judgment. But that goes back to, you said the word blessed.
Yeah,
People have to realize you don't have to believe everything you think. And think about that for a
Amen.
minute. You don't have to believe, and we all have these crazy thoughts that race through our heads and all of these, crazy. I mean, we have them all, right? And you don't have to believe everything you think. Not only that, but you don't have to believe what other people tell you either.
Well, if
So
you hear a negative thing or if you think a negative thing, best thing to do is right away doubt that thing, right? Because usually the positive thing is more accurate.
absolutely. Now you talked about, like you've tried all these things and your wife came to you. And well, my wife has been my biggest support, and it's been some dark days. My wife's like, we'll get through it. And she, I mean, the simplest things that she said, she never doubted me. She never undermined me when I said, hey, I'm going to do this. I mean, she gave me a couple of times. She gave me, joked about her, a little bit of sarcasm, but she never was like, this ain't going to work. And everybody fails and this and that. I mean, you talk about a business owner in general. What is it? 10% of them make it after 3 years. I mean, it's an alarming number. I mean, and these people put their heart and soul and dreams. They have a passion for what they want to do. And you've got a very, very small percentage that actually the success. And then it's even less past 5 years, because they give up hope or they run out of funds or whatever the case may be. Right. I mean, and they're putting their heart and soul into this day and night. I mean, people are like, oh, I want to go own a business. I'm like, that's great. But there's some days that you're like, man, I got to get up before everybody. I got to make sure everything runs smooth. And then when crap hits the fan, guess what? Who gets called? You do.
Yep. Yep. And that happens more often than people realize, and that's and the thing is, it's okay because
That's right.
every experience you just learn and you get tougher and you get stronger and hopefully you don't get harder. You get tougher, stronger, not harder. That's.
I mean, you look at some of the biggest brands out there, and if you read their stories, they started in garages, and a lot of them were on the verge of bankruptcy, or maybe they talk about this was happening or that was happening, and all of a sudden it was one day or it was one thing. They just did one more thing that helped them get over that edge.
Yeah, I was, and in fact, just crazy. Just Wednesday morning, I got some news that was negative. I mean, it was a deal I was hoping was going to go through, right? And I heard they said, we don't want to carry your product yet, but they left the door open in another way. So I was grateful for that. But it was about a half hour after that, I made a phone call on a whim just to check up on a buddy, and another door opened. It just happens. And as long as you don't let that just drag you down, keep going, keep going, keep going. And something's going to happen. And sometimes that it doesn't happen that day, and you go to bed and you're like, I got to fight to make sure I get up the next morning. Just get up the next morning and keep going. It's easier said than done some days, but okay.
The word that you said is it hasn't happened yet, or we're not ready yet. Isn't that true? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
it's I'm not there yet. I'm gonna get. I mean, instead of just they told me no, and the sky is falling. And that is so true in from my experience and things that I've seen. If something goes wrong or doesn't go the way that I had, or the deal that I had in place, or in buying a house, if and my wife and I joke about this because we've purchased a lot of houses and we put a lot of offers in. And what happens is, let's say they go south for whatever reason and it wasn't meant to be. Then looking back, we look at 3 years or 2 years later, we're like, well, we weren't meant to be in that space.
Right.
We weren't meant to live there. And the problem, and the thing is, like, we were passionate about being there. We loved it, right? We're like, oh, we want to be there. But yet there was something we didn't see. And then, so we're like, okay, well, that wasn't meant to be. Let's go on to the next deal. And then for like you, the door opened for another deal. And then a year from now, those people could call back, or 2 months, like, hey, we got a lot of people asking about it. We need you to come back in here.
Right. right?
Wow.
And you only see it down the road, and that's great. I'm 53 years old, just turned 53. I'm not getting younger. And frankly, I reinvented my life a couple of years ago. It's still building, and with this farm ranch thing, that's going to happen, and that's a new beginning, and it's crazy, and that's just fine. If I'm 80 years old and I reinvent again, that's that's just learning. That's things are happening. So
That is
love it.
fantastic. So you want to, here's a question. So are you just passionate about getting in the dirt and the way that makes you feel? I love to garden as a hobby. I wish I could
Yeah,
do it more.
me
I,
too.
I just, I like being out there. I like seeing the progression of the plant. I like to see, okay, I like to eat the plants. I mean, I don't
Oh
know why.
man,
It's euphoric.
nothing better than going out in the garden and grabbing a fresh tomato and just
Mm-hmm.
digging in, right? I mean, no, I grew up in Western Oregon, surrounded by cornfields and cow pastures, and half mile from the Mackenzie River on a country road, and and growing up, I always said I'm going to be. I actually said I'm going to be a rancher. Um, and I, you know what? I put it out there, and we moved away and came here to Utah when I was 14, living in a subdivision, and I've lived in subdivisions ever since. And honestly, I lost track of that dream. I lost faith in that dream uh, somewhere along the way. But then I started thinking about it, and it was my desire to work with vets and give them more purpose is leading me back to, within the next couple of years, I'm going to be a farmer, a rancher, and doing what I like. I love getting in the soil. I love the agricultural stuff. That's where I thrive. Um, uh, I know one of the things that I've got in my business plan is growing Christmas trees, and I love
Wow.
Christmas. I am very strange, man. People called me a Renaissance man. I sing, I do magic, and I'm an airborne infantry guy that makes soap and is an attorney. That's one of the weirdest combinations you've ever seen. And whatever.
Well, you have to do what fills your soul. And, well, something that came to mind when you were saying that is I have some agents that are part of my team that got an insurance business, because it was a way to pay the bills. They've been so successful in the insurance space that they were able to go back and purchase their family farm that was in the verge of losing. So been in the family for years and on the verge of losing it. And with that, able to bring it back to life, expand that now cattle, sheep, goats, and really get back to it. But that's what fills their soul. But they were able to do it with the resources and dollars they made from the insurance side. And it's fascinating when you talk about, I lost track of that dream. I don't think you ever lost track of it. It just temporarily got put on hold, I believe. And now you're going to be able to do that through this foundation and help other people do the same. Some things that I learned as I talk to people across the country is I didn't realize that there are programs at the federal level that will help you get the dollars you need at a low interest rate to farm. And I was like, I had no idea. And they need it. I mean, agriculture is dying and we need people, like you said, like growing Christmas trees or tomatoes or cucumbers or whatever it may be. We need that generation, that next generation.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what this is geared toward. And you hit something that's really important. You offer a tool for, yeah. I mean, one tool might be the vehicle toward a dream. And that's often the way it works in my soap business, right? Might be the tool that's opening all this for the farm ranch thing. I love seeing somebody get into like insurance, like you represent, and that's the tool. I love that they're getting their family farms and keeping them in the family.
Oh
That
yeah.
is so great, and couldn't have happened if they didn't have another monetary source through that insurance, right?
Mm-hmm. I
So
mean, the people I interviewed on my show a while ago, I think I told you this as well, is they opened an arcade and the arcade allowed them to insurance, or insurance allowed the arcade, and then they're able to give back. It's like getting that bank loan, right? Like you have the soap, it's that bank loan that allows you to have the resources to then go and do these things that will help other people and get that impact in the community.
yeah, it's getting there.
Hey, I admire it. Anybody that can start a business of any kind
Right.
and just stick with it. I admire that. I mean, it's hard. The first 2 years, I mean, it's rough. It is. It's just rough. And like you said, that deal that was supposed to come through didn't come through. And, whether you were counting on it or not counting on it, but it hurts, man. You're like, oh, just another setback, right?
Right. Right. But it's just another setback. A setback doesn't
Yeah.
mean that things aren't moving forward.
We've talked about a few things here on the show, and, talking about, the foundations you're on. Let's do this. What's a story you'd like to share? And then we're getting close to time here. And then any last thoughts you'd want to leave with the audience? And then we're going to do two things. You and I got to go to lunch. And the second thing is I get back and I'm fascinated about the process of just making soap and how that all comes together. But we'll have to have you up on another episode. So any last thoughts, inspiration about, the conversation we've had today? And then we'll get you back on the show and wrap this thing up.
Oh man. Any last something. I'll tell you what, I never expected to see myself here in life. So this is the last little kernel of wisdom, right?
Yeah.
Um, uh, uh, as a little kid, I was always that guy that people were saying, "Hey, be quiet, you're too loud." But one thing I've learned is one thing may work for one person and it may not work for another. Find your own way of making it work. We all have different personality types. Friend of mine, Blair Hope for Life Foundation, his moniker is, help people with passions and talents. Everyone's got their own passions and talents. Well, they're not
Hmm.
the same as mine. And I think that's the key to success, is helping other people use their passions and talents to their fulfillment, and it all comes together. So
Oh, so true. I
and
just think about me and coaching, because I get involved with my kids coaching and I have the ability to do that. But one kid may respond one way and one versus another, but they're all unique, but they have a passion and a desire and a love of the game. They want to go out and compete.
yeah,
And it's my job as a coach to teach them to do it right and not get hurt, but yet do it their way. And
and
it's
yeah, you're not going to put the wrong kid or you're not going to put one kid in a position he's not going to thrive in, right?
no. And that's where it's like, I mean, I tell the kids, I said, my job is to put the team collectively together in the best position to win. And I said, to be honest with you, that may change. There may be something that I see in you that you don't see in yourself. And you're like, hey, I want to play this position, but I'm like, you really excel at this position. And this is where I need you. Now, could I get you in the position that you want to go play? We can if we get the score up, right? Let's say you want to run the ball, or you want to, you want to be the point guard in basketball, whatever it is. I will do my best to get you that opportunity, but you're really good at defense. That's where I need you. Can you do that for me? Because he has that natural ability, that natural talent.
Yeah, and that works into your insurance business as well. It works into my business. It's cross training's great, but let's maximize where you're really good already and really get you excellent at that, and then we'll worry about the cross training. Yeah, anyway.
No, I love the cover. We kind of, lots of great things that we talked about today. Brian, I really appreciate taking the time being on the show today. I'm fascinated with people. I'm fascinated with people's stories and how they just, you know what, you just kept getting up, right? The difference between somebody who's successful and as you pursue success, and if you say it's the relentless pursuit of success, I just got up one more time. I just got up. That's it.
Yep.
And everybody has that opportunity, and everybody is needed, and everybody is blessed. The word you used, blessed. Wow. Thank you again. As always.
Brian.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.